Oh, okay. I will have to look for that. Thanks for the advice, Paulette.
All right. All right. So we have begun. Yeah. So yes, for example, I've taken the ability for people to change their names off right now. You can also disallow participants to chat and share their screen, so you can really just shut it down completely if you feel so inclined. So there's
Can I
a
change
lot more now. Oh yeah, you're going to be able to do that now. I put it back on so you can rename yourself.
Sorry, I forgot to do that.
Because we trust all of you, and
okay, there we go.
At least for now. And as more and more people are coming in, this has been kind of the later group. We like almost doubled in the last like 3 minutes, and it's 12:07. So we thank you everybody for coming out to eConference number 7. Can't believe we're at number 7 already, and I think 3 or 4 hospitality suites and a couple of special events. We're doing great. So today we've got a little bit more of a themed conference. The first half is going to be focusing primarily on GLPA, on the Great Lakes Planetarium Association. We have Steve Crawford from the Kalamazoo Public Museum, who's going to be giving a presentation at the beginning. But Steve and his institution are also the hosts, knock on wood, for the in-person GLPA conference this October. And then in the second half of the conference, we're going to be shifting our focus to IPS, to the International Planetarium Society. We have Mike Murray, who's the membership chair. He's going to be presenting. We're going to get a little bit of an update on the COVID-19 task force from Mark Subarow. And then we're going to end the IPS time with a presentation from Dayna Thompson and Dani LeBlanc on the new Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, and a little bit of feedback there. And then, of course, we have open forum. And because it's Friday, it is best parts of the week. That's usually something we do with Renee Kerrigan. But if you're friends with Renee, you are probably aware that she has just had a baby. Baby's name is Rosemary, and she is in good health, both mom and daughter. So we're really, really happy that that went so smoothly for her. Another planetarium baby. So yay. Very excited there. And so, of course, I don't think this is anybody's first Zoom conference, but just remember, hands and chat, use it as much as possible. We'll keep watching that and make sure that we can keep questions flowing smoothly. I think we're right about on time. Steve, are you ready for your presentation?
Sure.
Okay, well then, without further ado, everyone, Steve Crawford from the Kalamazoo Public Museum. This is professional development for part-time presenters, something that might be especially useful once we start getting the facilities back open and start to ramp up hiring once again, maybe starting off with the part-time presenters first. So Steve, take it away.
All right, thank you. So yes, I am Steve Crawford, the somewhat goofily titled Theater and Planetarium Technologist at the Kalamazoo Valley Museum, which used to be called the Kalamazoo Public Museum, but it's close enough. Before I really get into some of the things that I've been doing to attempt to offer a little bit of professional development for our part-time presenters, I'd like to give a little bit of background on our institution for context. The Kalamazoo Valley Museum is located, of course, in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We're a sort of general public museum focusing on science and local history. And we are part of the local community college. The planetarium is a 50-foot dome with Digistar 6, and it seats a little over 100 people. You can also see an image of the exterior. It looks like on Eric Schroer's background right now, our planetarium coordinator emeritus. So the museum is open all but 4 days a year, not counting unexpected closures for snow days or global pandemics. And we offer at least 3 public planetarium shows almost every day. The planetarium has 2 professional staff members, 1 full-time, which is me, and 1 part-time. The vast majority of our shows, though, are presented by a handful of part-time presenters. Currently, we have 4, but we've had, so far as I can recall, as many as 7. Unfortunately, our museum does not hire specifically for that job. All of our planetarium presenters are interpretation specialists, which is what we call our frontline staff. Interpretation specialists walk the galleries, they work at the front desk, they run programs for school groups, so on. They do some cleaning, they do all sorts of things. And when we need another planetarium presenter, rather than being hired specifically for that, we choose someone from that group of interpretation specialists. But this is effectively an additional assignment, not a complete replacement for their original duties, which means that our presenters are what I call part-time presenters, because the planetarium is just one part of their overall duties at the museum. It also means that they tend to have no background in astronomy, in education, or in theater. I know some planetariums hire from people with theater backgrounds. It also means that the time they have dedicated to the planetarium, like I said, is quite limited. Typically, of the 25 to 29 hours that they're working a week, they are allocated to the planetarium for only about 12 to 14 hours, with the rest of those hours being used for duties elsewhere in the museum. And finally, it means that they don't actually report to the planetarium staff, and we do not have any role in creating their schedule or otherwise directing them to do things. Because of all this, we have to overcome quite a few hurdles to mold them into effective planetarium presenters. We, of course, initially instruct them over the course of a few weeks in the operation of the system and basic astronomical concepts. But once their training period is complete and we clear them to run shows on their own, instruction becomes quite a bit more scattershot, especially given their very staggered schedules. Rarely is there more than 1 or 2 planetarium presenters in the building on a given day. Luckily, though, we have long had quarterly meetings with our presenters. These meetings, though, by the time I had gotten into my current position, had really started to lose their focus and utility. They were mostly just reviews of rules and procedures and screenings of upcoming full dome shows, and maybe a review of the night sky for the upcoming season. Despite that, they had also grown to be 6 hours long, which was beginning to look like a real waste of everyone's time. And so the options were either to shorten the meeting considerably or to use these rare times when all of the presenters and planetarium staff had the opportunity to be together all in one room and refocus that into something that could be useful for all of us. So obviously I chose to attempt to turn these meetings back into something valuable. And beginning with our meeting in December of last year, December of 2019, I tried to model them on the kinds of professional development opportunities that my colleague Mark Reed and I are able to take part in. For a number of reasons, we aren't really able to send our presenters to conferences or really even workshops outside of our local area. That said, they will be helping out at the Great Lakes Planetarium Association conference this year. Obviously, we'll talk about that conference in a little bit. They are largely isolated from the greater planetarium community because of being sort of stuck in our planetarium. Sometimes ours is the only planetarium in which they've ever been, even just as a patron. In an effort then to expose them to more than just our way of doing things at KVM, one of the first things I decided to do was to invite guest planetarians to talk to them about how their planetarium operates. Things like what their daily schedule looks like, what kinds of duties staff there have, what kind of audiences they serve and how do they best serve them, what kind of shows do they offer, how many of their shows are live, pre-recorded, so on. So asking someone to travel to Kalamazoo for this was really out of the question. So we used Skype, and Nick Lake from the Adler Planetarium graciously agreed to be our guest. I unfortunately don't have an actual photo of that, but this will work just as well. I put him up on the dome, and we had a webcam in our planetarium so he could see our presenters. And he spoke to the group and took questions. And being able to hear the perspective of a planetarian from outside of our own institution really got a positive reaction from our presenters. And it was something they really appreciated. I also wanted to, of course, provide some concrete training on operating the planetarium that could build on what they already knew. So I put together a workshop introducing them to building presentations in Digistar. Our presenters have normally used the Digistar control panel when presenting live content, which works well enough, but any changes to what is available to them really requires me to implement it, as none of the presenters know how to do any kind of Digistar scripting. Like the guest speaker, this workshop, which was intended to give them more agency in their live talks, seems to have been really worthwhile, as most of them have actually switched now to using Digistar presentations as their primary mode of operating the planetarium. And additionally, a few of them have sought out additional one-on-one training on using a little bit more of Digistar, which is something that really rarely happened in the past, them seeking out additional help. The other big hit of the meeting was something that I had kept off the agenda to surprise them, and that was a constellation shootout. I'm sure most everyone is familiar with this idea, but if not, each of the presenters got a laser pointer, and I put up a night sky with a little bit of diurnal motion, and in turns, starting with the newest presenter, they had 45 seconds to name and find a constellation or a star or be eliminated. This was really hectic, but it was also really fun, and it got everyone moving around the dome. They really had a blast, and I think it really encouraged them by demonstrating that they knew more about the sky. They were more familiar with the night sky than they probably believed they were. And it also was a fun way of sort of showing some of the areas in which they could use a little more study. As with the quarterly meetings we'd had before this, we also spent some time on institutional updates and discussing upcoming events and things like that. But I made sure to leave time for an open forum of sorts so that the presenters could bring up anything that they wanted to discuss as a group. Our next quarterly meeting was to be held in mid-March, but unfortunately it got canceled as it ended up being the last day any of us were going to be allowed in the building for a while. I had planned to continue on this new path with these meetings, and of course I still do. For the March meeting, I had planned a review of recent astronomy news and space news using the Dome, not only to keep presenters informed, but also as a way to encourage them to include recent news that struck them as being personally interesting in their own talks, in addition to the backyard astronomy that is their typical subject. On the same note, I've been working on putting together a regularly updated sort of packet of information for them to look through while they're in the planetarium, which will include things like a current sky map with things to look out for, news about recent developments in astronomy or spaceflight, excerpts from our local astronomy club's newsletter, or maybe even articles from like the GLPA newsletter or the planetarium. Finally, my two big goals for this moving forward are to start my presenters on observing programs, because of course I think it's really important that presenters have some sense of the real night sky rather than just our simulated Digistar night sky. And then also to visit other planetariums, to take them on trips to see in person live programs at other planetariums. Both of these present pretty big challenges. Observing requires them to take time outside of work, which is not something I can really ask them to do very much. And visiting other planetariums, of course, takes travel time and money from the budget. But I'm certainly looking forward to trying to make these things happen. I always find professional development opportunities personally to be really invigorating and a huge boost to my enthusiasm for what I do at work. Most of the presenters in my planetarium will not stay in planetariums as a career, and I know that, but I want to offer them every opportunity to be great at the job that they have now, and to give them the best start I possibly can if they do choose to pursue a career in planetariums. So thanks everybody for listening, and if you have any ideas for ways to keep your part-time presenters engaged and learning and building their skills, please contact me and let me know. I would really love to hear about them. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So we're gonna open up the chat and the participant hand. So if any of you have any questions or comments, things that you can share about maybe your part-time presenters and how you train them, we can definitely go on ahead and do that now. All right. Going to go with Mark Webb first. Mark, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. That was really interesting, and you've really come a long way in a very short period of time. Getting from December of last year to where you are now. One thing that I think might be helpful is to do have your presenters evaluate each other's presentations. A lot of times people will learn more from a peer, or be more willing to accept criticism, constructive criticism from a peer than they are from a superior. So have them help each other might be something you could try.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That is something I had considered. I know they get very nervous presenting to each other, but I think it's a really valuable thing to do.
All right, Amy Gallagher, go ahead.
I try to have my more senior part-time staff train the newer part-time staff. And also because that gives some reinforcement to the more senior people and allows everybody to get trained more. But then everybody, even the more senior ones, I have one part-timer who's been with me for 12 years and she still gets so nervous when I walk into the room to listen to her. So I do the peer-to-peer listening, as well as I'll stand in the light trap and listen to a presentation so they don't even know that I'm in there listening. But I also highly suggest, if you can get your part-timers to another planetarium. I piled everybody into my minivan one time and took them all to Liberty Science Center, which was a 40-minute drive away, and we spent the day there. And I thought that was good professional development for all of them. That, and I was dying to see the new place because it had just opened.
Yeah. We're
Mary
only
Holt.
about it. Oh,
Mary, when Steve is done. Yeah, you're the host, so go ahead.
I was just going to say we're only about an hour south of Grand Rapids, so that's my first goal, is to take them to the Chaffee Planetarium. So, sorry.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was just gonna say a couple of things we do with our part-timers. If you're able to like have at all more frequent meetings, we do like a monthly meeting with all of our presenters. And lately we've started having, especially our presenters who work a little bit more, like 30 hours a week or so, that they give like a professional development presentation to the rest of the group. So it is kind of the peer-to-peer thing, like giving like a professional development style presentation. And in terms of watching each other, not making people nervous, I do a similar thing to Amy. If I go to watch someone's thing, I just do my best to sneak in so they can't see me.
All right, Steve, we've got a question from the chat from Chris McCall. How have you recruited your part-time presenters, and what sort of qualities do you look for?
Yeah, that's a really a good question, because we have such a small pool to recruit from. There are only normally about 15 to 18 interpretation specialists in the whole museum at any given time. So we only have a handful to choose from. So we kind of have to just go with our gut a little bit, but also anyone that has any kind of science background is automatically near the top of the list. Also, anyone with a lot of previous presenting is anyone with experience in other museums, or one of our best presenters right now. She's a naturalist. She has a biology degree, and she has worked for years in nature centers. And so she didn't have any astronomy background, but those skills, we were really lucky that someone on staff had those, and we were able to then train her very quickly to be a really great planetarium presenter. So sometimes we get lucky with things like that, but other times we really just have to pick the best person that we've got, and that can be on all sorts of factors. So.
All right, Paulette, go ahead.
There we go. So another thing that we do, instead of having people watch each other, is to actually have folks record themselves, do audio recordings in the planetarium. And that way they can watch it themselves, they can share and get feedback from their peers or their supervisor if they want. But I have found that it is a really good way to see personally some of the things that you do. I know I've definitely noticed a couple of my tics when I watch myself do shows.
All right, Alan Gould, go ahead.
Well, the first question that came to my mind was, when you're talking about staff meetings or meetings and professional development, is what do you do now when you can't have in-person meetings? Can you have Zoom staff meetings?
So yeah, we have met over Zoom a couple of times. not for nearly as long as we do at our quarterly meetings, of course, but just to sort of check in. And we are very lucky. All of our staff is currently being paid to work from home, including the floor staff, and that includes our planetarium presenters. So our meetings right now haven't been so much focused on this sort of thing, but more checking in on making sure they have what they need to complete the projects that, you know, they've been assigned while they're working from home. But we did talk a little bit, actually, on Monday is when we most recently met, and we talked about the sorts of things they can be doing to sort of sharpen their skills right now using Stellarium at home. And a couple of them they brought astronomy textbooks from our planetarium home so they can study up and things like that. So I also, actually, the last day that we were at the museum, I packed up binoculars for all of them and red flashlights and so on, so they could all take a little observing package home, because I figure I can't normally ask them to do observing because they can't do it during work hours, really. We're not open at any time when you could do observing. But if they're working from home, they could kind of shift their hours a little bit if they wanted to and go outside and get some experience with that. So.
Very cool. Eric, sure.
Hi, Steve. For your trainees, if you want to tell them that I'm going to have some broadcasted observing through the telescope, you can just kind of watch my Facebook page for what days that's going to happen, because it's so weather dependent. But it looks like Saturday is going to be a good day.
Great, thank you, Eric. I'll keep that in mind. I'll let them know. And I wanted to mention, Eric said in the chat that my first task for him when he was still the planetarium coordinator at our institution was as voice talent for one of the shows that he created. I was the voice of the New Horizons probe.
And then for those that'll be watching later on YouTube, just want to kind of fill in a little bit what's going on in the chat. Sarah from the Bell Museum up in Minnesota, they recruit undergrads as part of part-time staff. They've got about 20 on staff for the planetarium, come from a range of majors, and more importantly, only require that they have some astronomy physics background, or at the very least a passion for it. And the same thing from Sarah was continuing. They do pay the student staff. Because of the class schedules and the semester changes, you need to have a larger group to be able to pull from to be able to cover things correctly. And then a lot of people agreeing with taping yourself or having some sort of video of yourself so that you can go back and watch over and over again and pick out different things each time you're going through and reviewing. All right, Tiffany, going ahead.
Hey, Steve, first I just want to say thank you for presenting this. I think it's our part-timers are really important in giving them that extra time and those opportunities for professional development is really cool. My part-timers are students, so it might be a little different perspective, but one thing that I found that's really helpful is I've started having one-on-ones with my students. So probably every 2 weeks, roughly, I'll just meet with them one-on-one for 15 to 30 minutes at most. And we just talk about how they're feeling with the planetarium, what do they think they're struggling with, what kinds of projects they like, what things they don't like. And then that helps me figure out how I can help them and what areas they want to grow. And then I can kind of piece the team together that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. I try and do that a little bit too, but sort of irregularly. I just sort of drop in when they're in there and ask, how they're feeling. And, it seems really important.
All right, Carissa, go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to like kind of build onto everyone is talking about recording, and that's something we always definitely encourage. Also, a lot of our presenters have told us that they found it really helpful to give their, I think the hardest show that they have to do in the planetarium is the live star show, just because it is completely live and can be completely off the cuff. And obviously we have guidelines for it, but it is up to the presenter to bring that content. So a lot of the times we'll hear from presenters like, oh yeah, I'm practicing on my commute in and I'm recording myself while I'm driving in my car. We also try to give them, we try to schedule them either at the beginning of the day or after shows for the day, like an hour in the dome by themselves completely. And where they know that, you know, their supervisor isn't there, no one else is there, they can be on the microphone practicing for themselves. And we found that to be really beneficial because a lot of times they're just too nervous to do it for the first time in front of their supervisor or knowing someone else is around. So we found that giving them like maybe an hour or two by themselves has been really helpful.
All right, a quick question from Jeff Holt from the chat. Love to hear from people how they're doing their recording. So everyone feel free to jump in.
I've used we have a Zoom recorder that the museum sometimes uses for recording oral histories, and I've used that to record myself before, just hooking it into the system or just using the internal mics.
And then a lot of people recording on their phones, which seems to be a good idea. Noreen, go ahead.
One of the things that I found helpful when I was working with part-timers, especially like college interns in Boston and in West Hartford, was they were very nervous to go. They felt a little more comfortable presenting a pre-recorded show. They were a little nervous learning the introductions, and then once they felt better about that, getting into a live show, what helped was to have them do a part of the show. So for example, I might be doing the sky tonight, and then when we got to the Big Dipper, I would introduce that person as a Big Dipper expert, and then that person would come out and do the little part of the Big Dipper, and then, you know, pass it back to me, and sort of building upon their knowledge and their comfort level. And that's one way that they got into doing the live shows.
Very cool. All right. Anyone else want to add to that? That was a great discussion. I don't think Steve and I were expecting that much extra discussion afterwards. So we changed the schedule to kind of like, oh yeah, well, we only needed 15 minutes and really we needed 30. So that's great. And of course, if you have any more ideas, of course, reach out to Steve, or you can post things in the Dome Dialogues, either in the event page or on the main threads, and feel free to share that with the community. Of course, because Steve is part of the team that is hosting GLPA 2020, we're going to keep him on board for the next part here, which is an update sort of on GLPA as a whole, more specifically on the conference. We have a number of members of the GLPA executive team with us this morning. I'm going to go through and see who we've got. Past, present. Jeff, are you currently past president, or are you still president? Past president. I'm seeing Mike Smell give me the okay. So we have past president Jeff Holt, president Wilena McCulley, Mike Smale is here, Paulette Epstein's here. So what we're pretty much going to do is turn over the next 15 or 20 minutes to the team to give us an update on how things are going for the conference, and sort of how things are gearing up for what could be the only in-person planetarium conference of the entire year. So not putting any sort of extra weight on your shoulders, Steve, but it's going to be a big deal. So GLPA exec, the floor is yours.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. Renee Kerrigan, our conference planning chair, was planning on being here, but life got in the way. I should also mention we have our newly elected secretary, Tiffany Stone Wolbrecht, also on the call as well. So yeah, so at this time, the GLPA executive group met last Saturday. Now we had an online Zoom meeting. We normally meet in person in the spring, but we did it online. It generally worked out pretty well. And then we've also had a smaller subset who has met at length with Steve and the crew in Kalamazoo related to conference planning. The GLPA 2020 conference is still on at this point. It is scheduled for October 21st to October 24th. So it's kind of a second half of the week sort of conference, like many of the regionals are. You may have seen recently, we've already put out the call for workshop, panel session, or short course proposals. We put those out in advance, and then we have those decided on by the time we open up registration, which registration website, that information is on track to be opened up and distributed widely in the community in June. And again, the conference is in October. Oh, thanks, Waylena. Chris, our development chair, here as well. So much GLPA, too much GLPA. But yeah, so what we thought would be nice was Steve shared with us at exec some upgrades, some information about his site, the Kalamazoo Valley Museum, the hotel, the facilities, things of that nature. And as we have a lot of folks here, again, not just from GLPA, but from around the globe, we want to get this information out there because we also talked, and this will not be we're looking at how we can open this conference up to everybody. We're pretty certain we found a way. We're not going to require GLPA membership or anything like that. But if you're currently a member of one of the regional planetarium associations, you are welcome, and we are happy to have you at GLPA this fall. So without further ado, let's hand it back off to Steve Crawford.
Yes, I'm sorry that you all have to hear me go on more. I'm going to put up, though, some images of, if I can find the right window. All right. So this is just a sort of a map from our museum indicating the location of our museum, and it shows the Radisson Plaza Hotel. That will be the conference hotel. So they're right next to each other. They're very close. There we go. Is basically the same thing. You can see they're right next door, which will be very handy. No busing or transportation like that will be necessary. So this is the exterior of our museum. You can kind of get a little bit of a handle possibly on where you're looking at. We're at the red dot in that inset. And this is just sort of walking through the front doors of our museum, our friendly museum staff there. Normally it's a lot more well lit. I took this picture the last day we were open. As you can probably tell by all of the canceled signs. So down at the end of the first floor of the museum, we have our planetarium on the right there, and on the left is our flat screen theater. Sorry, a few of these are not all that relevant to this conversation. There we go. So this is our flat screen theater, the Mary Jane Stryker Theater, which is one of the locations that we will be having sponsor showcases and paper sessions. It seats a little over 80 people. It is also hopefully going to be newly renovated at the time of our conference. Those renovations have been obviously put on hold, but we're still hoping that we will be able to complete those before the conference. And even if we don't, it's still a great space and will work really well. Just more of the theater. And then right next door to the theater is our planetarium, which, as I mentioned when I was talking before, is a 50-foot dome. And we have Digistar 6. It seats a little over 100 people, about 107. I think there are 107 actual seats. And I guess I would And we have a Chroma Cove lighting system. We have an inset projector for, just a normal PowerPoint or what have you. We've also got, there's a pit, a pretty large pit in the center of the planetarium, which is currently empty, which will be, potentially a good space for sponsors to put equipment if they need. And pretty good space in the front there to present. We recently completed the construction of a mother's lounge on our second floor in the museum. So recognizing that that's really important for a lot of people. Anyone that is a new mother obviously will, they need space. And we have this in the museum, but there's also a space, I don't have a photo of it, but there's a space in the Radisson as well that is dedicated to this. So again, just to sort of hit home how close the Radisson is to the museum. This is a view of the hotel from the emergency exit doors that are right next to the planetarium. And it takes maybe about 5 minutes to go from the planetarium to the conference spaces in the hotel, more or less. It's the main entrance of the Radisson, but I expect most of the time we'll be using this sort of side entrance, which is on the side of the building facing the museum. Let's see. So we'll be using a number of spaces in the Radisson, of course. The Arcadia Ballroom, which is on the ground level, is where we will have most of the plenary sessions. This is where most of our meals will be, and also speakers and the business meeting. And it's really, really big. It's much larger than we would ever need. I think it seats 700 people in banquet rounds. So we'll have plenty of room you'll have plenty of room to move around and, talk to other people and all of that. And then on the lower level is the Kalamazoo room, which is where the sponsor hall will be located. And we will have, this is a 10,000 square foot hall, which is the same size as the ballroom. This is also much larger than we would need it to be, but I think that's a good thing. There will be plenty of space to move around, and yeah. Let's see.
Steve, while you're looking, we've got a question from Chris Seal. Chris, go ahead.
Okay.
I just wanted to know if the photo collection you've got here is available somewhere, if I can get those from you.
It's not really, but I could make it be.
Yeah, I'll
if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll drop you a line after.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks.
These photos of all of the photos of the Radisson interior are from the Radisson. So I would not want to post them publicly. They're not my photos really to share.
Yeah,
but
more
I imagine if you wanted to look at them, yeah, that'd be fine.
It's the planetarium photos as much as anything.
Oh, I took those. So yeah. Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. So again, this is just the sponsor hall. And so this is one of this is sort of where we'll have a breakout sessions. This photo is unfortunately not really even close to the way we'll have things set up. The way we're planning to have things set up is actually to split this room in 3. You might be able to see that there's tracks on the ceiling to split this into 3. This room, again, is much, much, much larger than we would need it to be. So splitting it into 3 will still be more space than we would need for our sessions. And we're planning on having tables set up like that so they can be used for workshops and paper sessions. And I think that might be, yeah, that's all I've got here.
Cool.
All right,
Thanks,
so we
Steve.
can, yeah, and then if we have any questions, I think specifically for Steve, this would probably be a good point. Feel free to either raise hands or in this case, just mute and unmute. I don't think we're gonna have 100 people trying to question Steve at once, but anything in particular that Steve can answer would be, this would be a good time for that. And if not, we'll turn it right back to Mike's mail. All right, all right, so who's next from GLPA?
Yeah, we didn't have much more, just a general wrap up. Again, we're hoping, stay tuned. Obviously, the situation is still very fluid and changing on a daily, weekly basis. But again, as for now, the plan is still on for October 21st to 24th, Kalamazoo, Michigan. And we will, again, we're working toward a plan to having registration posted and schedule and the conference website information set up by in June. So like I said, if you have any questions, check out glpa.org. Again, if you're interested in submitting a workshop or a short course or a panel presentation, that information is on the GLPA website right now. You can submit those now. Otherwise, the general call for papers and posters, that always goes out with the conference announcement. So when the website and the registration information is posted, the information about submitting a shorter 10-minute paper presentation or a poster will be available then as well.
We're also hoping to have an estimate of cost for meal package and registration posted probably by May 1st-ish.
Yeah, we are very very understanding of the current financial situation around the country and the situation that many people will be in the fall. So we are looking at everything we can do to make that price as low and as affordable as reasonable for anybody who wants to attend, GLPA members or not.
Excellent. Well, thank you to the GLPA exec, to Steve, for all the information today. And then, like Mike said, glpa.org for more information. Of course, as the information comes out, we'll have the conference page open up and hopefully, knock on wood, be able to see as many of you there in October as we can possibly get. So thanks, guys. That's where we can transition over to the second half of our e-conference today, which moves from GLPA to IPS. And so to start us off with, I'll introduce Mike Murray from Delta College in Michigan. He is the membership chair for IPS. And Mike, I'll let you talk for a bit about all of the great things that IPS has to offer, and of course, some of the new membership initiatives that you've been working with.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We're going from Mike to Michael to another Mike. So thank you all for tolerating the Mike regime here. It's great to be able to see you all. And I just wanted to give you not just an update, but let me give you just a real brief background on what's been happening with IPS and the whole membership process. As many of you are probably aware, for decades really, there was one position that was called the IPS treasurer / membership coordinator or chairperson. That had typically, of course, always been like just one person. And the idea of a person to handle an international organization by being both the treasurer and a membership director, chairman, we found, especially after the Vision 2020 research analysis from that group, was found that if we were really going to try to have a goal of better service, better communication, better benefits to IPS, then we really needed to split the membership portion off of the backs of the treasurer and let that be a dedicated group of people, not just one, that can really do some real research to find out what it is that IPS can do to move into the 21st century when it comes to what kind of services are people really looking for. And some of the surveys that have been done over the last few years, both by Vision 2020 and the IPS membership committee, has of course revealed a lot of misconceptions, and really, of course, to its own, because of its own doing. The lack of communication has left a lot of people with the impression that all IPS is a quarterly magazine and a biannual conference. And of course, there is an awful lot more than that. And so to be able to help not just show what those resources are, but also get feedback on where we want those resources and benefits to go in the coming years, that's why this committee, the membership committee, has formed. Now, this formed a little over a year ago, and we've got, I think it's like 8 people on the committee, and many of them are past IPS presidents. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge. There's a lot of great contribution from people like Alan Gould and Sharon Shanks, who have done a lot of work on the IPS website. By the way, that's another misconception, is that, oh, well, there isn't really that much on the IPS website that I can't find on my own. Well, I would challenge you all to share, if you don't know, or share with others. There is a lot on the website. You might have to dig a little bit at first, but there's been some redesigning going on. I'll let Alan address some of that if he'd like to. But there has been a lot of work and a lot of addition in terms of resources and reorganizing the way the website looks and navigates to help provide a lot more resources. Another thing that we really wanted to make sure that the membership committee could address were, what else does IPS provide that, say, regionals don't? One of the second most common thing that IPS has heard from folks is, oh, well, I already get everything that I need from GLPA or whatever regional they're a part of. Well, again, I would challenge you to take a look, because IPS has the ability to bring in the perspective and experience from an international group of people. And the way that that information can be shared, of course, traditionally has been through things like DOMEL, or of course, this great resource, the Dome Dialogues. But we're also looking at some other ways to be able to connect people. There have been some attempts at trying some other forums and things like that over the years. And usually the reaction is, oh no, I can't handle yet subscribing to one more thing onto the bunch. I can barely keep up with what's in DOMEL. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you can probably attest to that. Well, we're hoping to address that in a new way, and I'm going to show you what's new, because Mark is getting ready to, if it hasn't already, post a number of announcements, both in the new IPS e-newsletter and through a lot of other means, about a new forum that we hope will go and be able to reach a lot more people. Let me see if I can share my screen real quickly. This was something that we developed early on. Let me see if, can everybody see this? It's a Why Join IPS document.
Looks good, Mike.
Okay, good. So this was just like the short list of some of the ideas, some of the things that we had found that you can get from IPS. And a lot of these things are being developed, again, as a result of the Vision 2020 process and the surveys that have been going on. We wanted to take a deeper look at all of the things that IPS has been working on and is going to be developing and going to be communicating in a much more obvious way in the coming months and years. The way that there are more opportunities for getting involved, of course, there's a lot more now than just the American Operator in Italy program. There's Germany, there's opportunities to come to America. Hopefully, of course, after the whole COVID-19 situation starts to settle down, hopefully those things will be able to start back up again. There's been work in being able to share more resources, especially like video seminars and web chats and things like that. But being able to find other ways to share our resources has been a really big effort. One of the things that the first experiment was when Joanne Young had contact with the folks at Florida Today about the Apollo Anniversary series that was on video, created by some producers there in Florida, and their willingness to make those videos available for free. And in many cases, it might be to IPS members, but a lot of the resources we're looking to provide, especially right now, are going to be free to all planetarians. We really want to get people attracted into seeing what a new IPS could potentially become. And so we need people's feedback and input and involvement, even if it's just sharing ideas. So I just wanted you to see some of the things that have been listed. This is on the IPS website, and all those hyperlinks are active, so you can explore it in a little bit more thoroughly that way. All right, so with that, there's something else that I wanted to share with you, and it has to do with the new network. Something that can go, that can modernize way beyond what DOMEL had done. DOMEL was great as a vehicle for communication when it got started in the 90s, but I don't know if you guys have looked at the calendar, but it is the year 2020. There are a lot of great resources for being able to communicate. So let me see if I can pull that resource up there. Can you see that, the Planetarian Network?
No, we'll have to reshare the screen for that.
Okay, hang on a second. Let's go here. And hang on, I need to see if I can expand. Back out. Okay, I've lost my part of my screen here. There we go. Thank you very much. Let's try this way. Okay, how's that? Excellent. This addresses a research project that we started a few months back. We did a lot of research, especially Kristen had a lot of experience with some of the modern networks that are available that allow you to communicate in any number of ways, whether you wanted to be able to sort content, create subcommittees, be able to put in subjects and subscribe to whatever subjects you're interested in. That way and if you want email notices, you can pick and choose all the kinds of features that you might be interested in. So this is through a group, through a service called the Mighty Networks, and it has some incredibly excellent reviews. We found it to be very easy to use. It was something, and Mark will probably address this a little bit more if he's on, but the ability to be able to put up any kinds of subjects that you want. There have been questions that can be posted. There are subject areas. In fact, here, let me go in. So the activity you can sort, you can see what kinds of activities you can look at the different subject areas that are available. So for instance, there's one in here called virtual programming, and you can see what has been posted relative to that particular subject, and people can post resources there. You can find out, if you're looking for lists of things to do for your audiences virtually right now. So there are just so many different ways of being able to to use the network. And so one of the other things that I wanted to point out is that we've already created a welcome page so that you can get an instant orientation as to how to use it and how to set up your own unique profiles. And it's in very, very few steps. We found that the learning curve hopefully is pretty easy to get through. So there will be an invitation coming out, but this is free for anybody to join, and we'll be populating it with more and more resources over time. But Mark really wanted to get this started earlier than planned, so that for the biggest thing is to be able to share resources, especially during the COVID-19 situation, so that people can compare and add resources of things that you might find useful during this particular time. And also, there's been some great questions on what do we all need to think about before reopening. There was a little thread I saw on the Dome Dialogues about that, but we're covering a lot of that content here in the Planetarian Network too. So it's just at the beginning, but we would love to get more people signing in, getting it involved, starting to populate things inside there. So that was the big thing that I really wanted to let everybody know about. That's been a real big effort, especially from the membership committee. If Mark is on, if for anyone else, Alan wants to add to this, that's what I have.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, so if we don't have anything additional for membership, Alan, if you're on the sidelines for this one, we're going to change up the schedule just a little bit. We're going to move up the EDI committee update. So Mike, I'm going to stop your screen there. I know we have both Dani and Dayna in the room, so we're going to turn it over to them in just a second. The EDI committee, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, is one of the newest and I would probably say one of the more important committees that we currently have in IPS. Two co-chairs. There's Dani LeBlanc, who is from the Museum of Science in Boston, and then Dayna Thompson from Ball State University. And so, ladies, I will just let you guys take over. Dani and Dayna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and hello, everyone. Again, if you don't know me, I am Dayna Thompson. I'm the director of the Brown Planetarium at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, the USA. I'm really excited to talk to you today about what we've been doing for the EDI committee within the IPS. Dani, do you want to give her a quick intro?
Sure. This is also my first time that I get to join one of the e-conferences live, so I'm very excited for that. But I have been watching them offline. My name is Dani LeBlanc. Yes, as Mike said, I am from the Museum of Science in Boston. I am the director for the planetarium and for adult programs, and have been in the industry in the field for 20 years.
Great. So we just wanted to share with everyone what we've been up to with the EDI committee, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee in the IPS. We've been working hard on creating this committee because this is more of a new committee. It was originally a task force or working group, I think, but it got changed to be a standing committee. So Dani and I have been working since December 2019, so last December, on all of this work for the EDI committee. But Dani and I have both been involved with EDI efforts, so efforts pertaining to equity, diversity, and inclusion for a number of years, actually. So we're really excited to bring our knowledge and experience and also just resourcefulness to the IPS and the planetarium community. Let's just jump into actually defining what these terms are. So what is equity, what is diversity, and what is inclusion, and what does that mean to the IPS? So for equity, a simple definition could be that it's an approach that ensures everyone has access to the same opportunities. So it recognizes that there are certain advantages and barriers that exist with people and different opportunities that they might have or be exposed to or might not be exposed to. So it's recognizing that, but then also trying to make sure that there is fair treatment and access and opportunity so that all people can be included. So it's about identifying and eliminating barriers that may be preventing full participation of some groups of people. So for diversity, it's just the presence of difference within a given setting. And different people have a different definition of diversity. That's the most basic one that can really be explained for all of them. But our definition of diversity includes the diversity of thought, so different ideas, perspectives, and values, as well as how someone might present themselves to the world. And then inclusion. It explains environments where individuals or groups can be and feel welcomed, respected, supported, and valued in order to really fully participate. So this is more about how people feel and how they feel internally, and then how they feel other people feel around them. So it's important here to note that while an inclusive group is by definition diverse, a diverse group isn't always inclusive. So again, when we talk about inclusion, it's really about how people are feeling, and it's about having a welcoming environment that embraces differences and offers respect in words and actions for all people. So we want to make sure our inclusion is about making sure that people can feel free to really be themselves in a certain situation. So a different way of looking at equity, diversity, inclusion is through graphics. And some people, they know what equality is, but not so much equity. And equality is, shown in this graphic where everyone's given the same thing, but people have different starting points. People are experiencing life in different ways. So equity is about recognizing that and giving people the tools so that there's more of an equal playing field, okay? Diversity is a little bit easier for some people to understand because we can quantify it pretty easily. But you can tell by this graphic here that there's definitely a diverse group of people. There are differences within this group of people. And diversity is not about an individual. So you can't really have a diverse individual. We recognize that people are unique and complex individuals on their own, but they're not diverse. You have to have a group of people or an organization establishment in order to really have diversity. And then for us, again, diversity is about not just what you see, but the internal things too, people's values and so on. Inclusion is a little bit more difficult to describe with a picture because it is a lot about how people feel, right? But you can kind of try to think about it as we have this table full of people and they're feeling free to present their ideas, but they also feel like those ideas have been heard, okay? So inclusion, you can think about, again, having diversity at that table. And then within that diversity, people feel comfortable to speak their mind. And then also that they feel like that message has been heard by others. Okay, not just heard, but also valued. So I want to pause here just for a second and ask you a question, and you're not going to answer it right now, but we're going to come back to this at the end of the presentation and just start to think like how or why is EDI important to you? So in what ways does equity, diversity, and inclusion matter to you? And you can think about this while we're finishing our presentation here, but you can write some things down because again, we're going to come back to it at the end and start like the Q&A. And if there's anything else anyone wants to add to this presentation, we'll be able to discuss it then. Okay. All right, so now that we kind of know what EDI is, what do we actually do? So within the new IPS standing rules and bylaws, this is what we're charged with. Our function is to work to make sure that the IPS fully benefits from the talents of all of our members. And what Mike was saying about how the IPS brings the international component, it's really about making sure that we are doing that within the IPS. We have a full range of people, and that we also can then bring those ideas and values back to our public programming in our individual planetariums and institutions, because we all serve diverse communities. And within that, and these are, again, these points are also within the bylaws and standing rules, we are committed to being the first point of contact, for the concerns of IPS members and the planetarium community regarding EDI. So that means that we address grievances pertaining to the IPS code of conduct. We vet IPS conference host sites, and also try to help with selected conference sites and various other things. So basically, we're just committed to supporting and fostering healthy relationships, conflict resolutions, and a strong community. And that's mostly it. That's what it really comes down to. We want to make sure that we can have conversations and understand that we are all trying to work towards these EDI efforts together as a community. And we need a lot of help to do that. So we have a whole committee, Dani and I, and here's all of our current committee members. But we encourage you to reach out to us. If you haven't noticed, our email address is at the bottom here, so that you can email us, reach out to us, and see how you can get involved. And it's on every single slide, so you can't miss it. But we do have a nice, really great dedicated team, but we want more. We recognize that we need more voices, as many voices as we really can have with these efforts to help us grow. So how are we actually going to do all the things that we're charged with within the IPS? So back in December, Dani and I created the Inclusive Excellence Plan. So we have this detailed plan. It's a 4 to 5 year plan. So it's a lot of work. It was a lot of work to just create the plan. Now we get to implement it. And we're defining inclusive excellence as the commitment to respect and embrace equity, diversity, and inclusion in people, ideas, and opinions. So it's about respecting and embracing EDI within this one term. So instead of always referring to equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts as EDI, we just have this other term called inclusive excellence that hopefully kind of resonates with people and makes people have like ownership over the idea and the work that is involved with inclusive excellence. And this is a term that's being used by different organizations and establishments around the world. So the plan actually has 5 goals. Our plan revolves around a goal for culture and climate of inclusion, so creating that. Inclusive policies and systems, inclusive conferences and events, recruitment and retention for an inclusive organization, and professional development for inclusive excellence. So we have detailed descriptions under each of these goals. And we also have a full plan, it's like 7 pages, I think, that has objectives and tasks to make sure that we are really focused on these goals and ensuring that we can do work on them. So here we have some new terms that we just wanted to pause and define for you, and that's in goal number 1. So what does culture mean and what's climate? So the way to think about culture is to think about the way things are done in an environment, or just like it's the way we do things around here. Whereas climate is how the environment and the people in it feel. So again, climate is more about how people feel, and culture is more about the policies and the practices that are in place within an organization. So in order to really do all of what we have hoped to do and plan to do within 4 to 5 years, and this is like a process, right? This is always fluid work. We're always trying to adjust and adapt to new things coming up. So we're not feeling like yes, this is a 4 to 5 year plan, but the work is ongoing, right? So in order to help us get through all these goals, we have a timeline in place. This was our timeline back from December to March, and we don't have an updated one for April through June because of COVID-19. We had one drafted, but it's all gotten shifted. Our work has been shifted. So just a snapshot of how we're actually going about all of these goals is that in December, we were really focusing on planning. We got feedback on our inclusive excellence plan from our committee that we pulled together in December, and that got finalized in June, or excuse me, in the middle of January. We also noticed that we needed to update the code of conduct. There's a strong another top priority piece was about the conferences and events. So creating maybe like a rubric, or what we're calling now a conference assessment toolkit. That's on the timeline here. And then creating this climate survey. So remember, the climate definition is more about how people are feeling in an organization, and the climate survey is going to help us get some information from membership and the planetarium community to understand how they're feeling with certain pieces of our work that we are doing. So what work have we been doing? Dani and I we have this shared Google Drive where we put all of our to-do items on, and we keep track of everything we've done. So here's a snapshot of all of the objects that we've done. And there's more to it than this. But to summarize it all, we designed that 4 to 5 year plan for EDI efforts, our inclusive excellence plan. We built our committee up. We designed and released a new IPS code of conduct, which just to note here, we do have the goal number and then the objective and sub number within that, just to give you an idea of just all that we're putting into this. And the IPS code of conduct is intended to be a tool that helps membership learn and grow together. And it's designed to encourage meaningful discussion around what is expected and acceptable professional behavior, but it also allows room for mistakes. And I think that's a big part of it. Okay, that's something that was really important that we included with it. We designed and released a suggestions and comments system that's on the website, and you can fill out an idea and submit it to IPS through this online form on the IPS website, and it's anonymous if you choose it, if you choose that. Having a way for membership to provide feedback in an anonymous way is really important. And there are other ways to contact IPS though, and sometimes contacting people directly is important, but some situations you just don't have the opportunity or the option. And then we also designed and are currently reviewing a new conference site assessment toolkit that I mentioned before that goes into conference events, or conferences and events. And we are also working on, so that's what we've done so far. We are working on implementing that new conference site assessment toolkit. So we need to not finalize it because our work, again, is always fluid. We're always learning and adapting. But we are looking to implement this to help the bidding process and picking a conference site for the future. Then we're also trying to create that climate survey and distribute it so we can gain information that will guide all of our future efforts. We are developing a white paper for the case for inclusive excellence. So helping membership and others understand why it's important, not just within the IPS, but with our individual institutions. We're also just trying to create an event guide to help events and conferences. So that's different from the conference site assessment toolkit. The guide is more about making sure that events that do go on are inclusive as possible. And then we're trying to provide professional development opportunities within goal number 5. And I'm excited to share with you that we are having one of those later this month on April 29th. And it's someone from Ball State that I attended their workshop last month, and she just seems really good for the planetarium community because she has this kind of lip style of presenting, and because it's a workshop. So it's a workshop on understanding and responding to implicit, or some people refer to that as unconscious bias, where we got to talking, we had kind of like a think, pair, share session. And it was just a really fun, but also educational experience. So it's coming up on the 29th, that's a Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, and it is going to be through Dome Dialogues here. So I'm going to come back to that question I asked earlier, but I also want to recognize that I did go over a lot of content pretty quickly. So if you do need anything explained again, or if you have any questions, we're definitely going to get to that, okay? But I'm hoping that we can come back to this question and maybe have some dialogue on why EDI is important to you. And I've been talking a lot, so Dani, why don't you go first, and then I'll say why EDI is important to me after you.
All right, thank you. And before I say why it's important to me, I want to say that, you know, these values are longstanding values of the IPS. They're not new. The IPS has always been a very, very strong community. I've always been really impressed by the values that we all share from people all around the world, coming together, doing the same kind of work, and, you know, seeing the value in education and all of the things that are so important to all of us, and these common threads that we all find, regardless from where we are. So we're just, the existence of the EDI committee is to put those in, to put them on paper, so that we can communicate them to each other and remind each other of them, communicate them to potential new members, people who are coming in the organization for the first time, and just helping us commit to living by these things that we say are important to us. That said, EDI is important to me personally because I just see the strength in differences, and the value of seeing different perspectives that are wildly different from my own, that push me to and challenge me to revisit and rethink my own worldview. And I think that that constant reflection that comes from those differences, and that strength that results, and the growth that results, is just, I think that that just helps us become better people, and keeping those open minds. So that is my answer to that question. One of my answers. There are many answers to that question, but that is the one that I'm.
Yeah, and thanks, Dani, for kind of backing up and providing that other input. It's definitely something that I sometimes forget to even mention, because I have always felt really welcomed, and I have felt all those things so deeply that I guess I forget to even mention it. But it's important to remind not just others but ourselves of how wonderful of a community the IPS is, and just the planetarium field in general. So for me, why is EDI important? I would say because it's kind, and that's different from nice, right? So you can say hard things to people, but still be kind and respectful. And I feel like EDI kind of helps with those difficult conversations. And by doing so, it allows for us to be productive. It allows for us to work on projects in a deeper, more meaningful way, and also include, and by doing so, like we're really including more voices and growing together for sure. So I don't know, like we can open this up to anyone really, but I was kind of hoping that Joanne Young might want to go first, because she gave during one of our meetings last month a really great example of why it's important. Not to put her on the spot.
Here we go. Yes, thank you. And I'm honored to be on the committee, and often I just want to let you know that often I have felt outside of the community, even though I've been a big part of it, but I'm not an astronomer, and I don't know. I've not run a planetarium. I've always supported planetarians. So I always felt like a second-class citizen. So, I mean, it actually makes me want to cry. But with this committee, it includes me. I know I've been president of IPS, but there's something more than that. It's opening our arms to everybody, no matter how they feel or what they've studied, what they look like, what age they are. There's something about learning to be inclusive and to embrace everyone. And so what I realized, what was happening to me, to IPS, was that the culture and climate of EDI is like the blood flowing through the veins of IPS. And I mentioned that, and I said it's like enriching the blood cells, but then I realized I wasn't being fully inclusive. So I included the white cells too. and I just love this committee. It's a breath of fresh air. It's like new life. And I thank you and Dani, I mean, the both of you, for taking this on. Clearly, it's a great passion of yours, and welcomed.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Yeah, it definitely takes two people to lead. We have we were very strategic with why we have two people to chair this committee, but a whole group of people. So it's a lot of work, a lot of voices that go into everything we do, and we're really fortunate to have a great committee of people to offer that. And again, if you're interested, please contact us.
All right, Marco, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was thinking about inclusion with our mobile planetarium. It's very particular in our case. I realized that when we go to a school or a high school, we're not filtering out people. If you have a fixed dome, they select which group is going to visit you. But when we go there, there's no filter. We got everybody there. So we have to be very ready all the time to get wheelchairs inside our mobile dome, getting deaf people, blind people, uh, the and we have been taking special care with other persons in high schools and schools. I don't know if you have realized, but when we get there, there are security officers. There are the ladies in the kitchen, those who are cleaning the school. We always get them, and of course for free, inside our dome. We ask the principal, please let them get into our dome, because that's a population that usually doesn't have the opportunity to know a planetarium. So we're always very careful in getting them into our domes too. So the thing is, when we are mobile, we have to be more inclusive because we have everybody there. As an anecdote, people who are claustrophobic are the hardest to get into. But besides them, everybody else gets. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marco. Is there anyone else who wants to share maybe why it's important to you, either personally or at your facility? I think Susan's trying to go. So Susan Button.
There we go. I joined IPS because I wanted that diversity. I was isolated with my portable dome. And I was looking for some place to connect with colleagues because it's very isolating to have a portable dome. And I found that, and I was raised to believe that the people of the world are flowers of one garden. They're all beautiful in their own way and add color and interest to everything. So my passion has always been international connections, and IPS provided me with that so well, and I'm so happy. But when I first joined IPS, portables were discriminated against and they were mocked and treated as second-class citizens. And after 35 years, I'm very happy that's no longer the case. So I have sort of a feeling of how people feel when they're excluded from that experience. Joining an organization to be connected and then being treated as sort of a second-class citizen. It changed rather rapidly in the officers and the council. They saw the value. It just took a while for people to change and get their attitudes adjusted. So yay, portables. And Marco, you said it perfectly, so inclusive. And in this time, I put in the newsletter that portables can go to schools with just their projector, not even have to have the dome, so people aren't scared to go inside the dome. We can ease into portables going back to schools by using just a projector in a room, or in many interesting ways that have been done with just the projector. So yay, portables. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. You kind of reminded me of the quote from Sue Batson on the GLPA website for top 10 reasons to attend a GLPA conference. And it's, if I were to go into a room with everyone from my entire school district who does anything close to what I do, I would be sitting in a room all by myself. So like when you're saying that you joined for that community. And so anyone else?
Patty, go ahead.
Well, I kind of wanted to draw attention to something that Michelle put into the chat, where she said it's important to learn how to communicate with someone who has a different opinion than you and seeing value in it. And in that way, all can grow. And it reminds me of a personal experience that I had. A lot of you know Dr. Dan Hooper from the planetarium, or I guess the cosmology short courses for planetarians. And so we had invited him to come speak at a MAPS conference, but he also only agreed to do that if he could give a presentation in a planetarium. So we chose mine, which was 2 hours from the site. So Dr. Dan Hooper stuck in a car with me for 2 hours. So everybody's like, what do you talk about with a cosmologist? Well, we talked about religion, which was really interesting because as a lot of you know, I'm a Christian, he's an atheist, but it was really interesting to have conversations with each other because I wasn't trying to convert him. He wasn't trying to tell me I'm an idiot. We were just sharing what we believed, why, and it was just such a valuable conversation that years later, he and I still, when I see him, he's like, hey, Patty, and we still feel like we're really good friends, which is really awesome. And I think about that because what we see with our school community is we actually get a lot of private groups, and we have some Muslim communities come in. I have some Christian groups that come in. I have some Jewish communities that come in, and we all have very, very different opinions. And of course, being a public school teacher, there's only so much that you can and should say about religion, but I always want to foster their beliefs into our conversations and make them feel like this is a valuable part of whatever we're talking about. Because as we all know, it's like astronomy and is all about the cosmology and people's beliefs about the universe. And so that can be their religion. And I'm just trying to remember that, and incorporating that in conversations has been very, very meaningful to me.
Thanks so much, Patty. Anyone else?
Oh, Jeff Holt, go ahead.
This might be too obvious, but I think, the analogy of the human body or a car is so important to our understanding of our organizations at whatever level, whether it's our institution or a regional or IPS. If we're all tires, the car doesn't work very well. And so we need all the different parts of the car to function appropriately. The other thing that I think EDI is important to me is that the more diverse and inclusive our planetarium community is, and our staff and our planetariums, the more we reflect the communities that we're trying to serve.
Yes, absolutely.
We've also got Mark Webb. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's kind of what Jeff was saying. If it's important to us, it's imperative for us to have equity and inclusiveness and diversity in our institutions. We would never think for a moment to do anything otherwise. And so it's impossible to achieve that goal with our planetariums if we aren't doing it within our own community as well. We have to be able to have other voices to listen to in order to be able to speak to those other voices in our own domes.
Okay, great. Any last comments? I think we have about 30 seconds, not to rush anyone. And while you're waiting, you can think about what part of a car are you? So. Okay.
Well, I'll briefly kind of throw in sort of one of the defining characteristics that I've hoped for these e-conferences is there's a power that comes from being able to mute and unmute everybody, but there's also a decorum that comes from everybody knowing that no one can really be interrupted and talked over in these sorts of settings now. And I think that for certain people, to be completely honest, probably a lot of the women in our field, it's probably something that they're used to, is being in a meeting and having a man either take their idea or talk right over them. And to be able to have this sort of level playing field where everybody can come in and has an equal opportunity to engage and be part of the dialogue. That's just something that we're going to continue to hold really, really strong to. And a lot of that came from sort of being as a member of the EDI committee and getting to watch really powerful, intelligent, creative people do their job, to try to bring that and even if it's, hey, everybody gets a chance to talk and you get to say what you want, and nobody's going to talk over you, because we'll kick them out if they do. I think that's just, it's exciting. And I hope that, we continue to foster that as we're moving forward. So
Yeah.
thank you, Dayna and Dani, in a really big way for that.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for that too. I was at a workshop where we basically had the floor and we were able to talk as long as we wanted to. And I, at some point, I couldn't figure out how to stop. And I was like, I'm so used to people cutting me off by now. So I don't really know where a good stopping point in this conversation is. So I've had to work on actually finding my cues of where to stop, because I'm so used to getting spoken over. And it's just everyone, and it's just kind of how conversation goes sometimes, but good point. So I'm glad that there are some people who are thinking now about what part of a car they are. But if you do have any comments on what part you think you are, put them in the chat. But if you have any questions about EDI, feel free to reach out to Dani and myself at edi@ips-planetarium.org.
Thank you, Dayna. Thank you, Dani. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
everyone.
it. And so now we're of course right on time, as is usually the case here. We're now an open forum. If anybody's got anything they'd like to talk about that we haven't already talked about or discussed, now's the time to go ahead and bring that up. So if you do, just put your hand up in the participants window and we can call on you. If not, give it like 10, 15 seconds. Then we can transition into what I think is everybody's favorite part of the Friday meetings, best parts. So, all right, not seeing any open forum. That's good. Ken Brandt letting us know that there's a virtual program that he's going to be presenting on Saturday, April 18th. That's at noon Eastern time. And then it's both here in the chat, and I saw that Ken posted that in Dome Dialogues if you're interested. In the YouTube, we'll put it as one of the comments so that you can access that as well. So what I'm going to do now is kind of open it up to everybody. What is the best part of your week? And we'll go from there and kind of end our Friday e-conference on a high note. All right, Mary Holt.
So my best part this week is also partly in anticipation of a best part hopefully soon, in that I am hoping to get a couple of guinea pigs that are just across the bay, and their names are Pancake and Waffle, and I'm waiting by my phone to see if the shelter calls me back to see if I can adopt them. So
That's adorable. Right. Any other best parts you'd like to share from this week? Or really, it's been 2 weeks since we've done best parts, so feel free to go crazy with that. Okay. Oh, Patty.
Well, well, the picture behind me shows the best parts. The hospitality suite last night with all of the presentations you would never give to your regular audiences. I have not laughed that hard since the whole COVID-19 shutdown, so it was magnificent.
I don't think a moose has been as important in a planetarium setting as it was last night. Sally, going ahead.
All right, I'm on. Sorry, I'm on my phone. Okay, so my team, Caitlin, Tad, and Sarah, has done a great job collaborating with our museum staff on doing all kinds of great social media. And this morning we got something online. Our marketing director passed it on to us. It just said, "Thanks so much for all the amateur astronomy tips lately. I have a small telescope, and if it weren't for your posts, I never would have gone out to see the moon tonight or Saturn and Jupiter this past week. Please keep them coming." We all know that's what we want to do when people come into our planetarium. We don't have a planetarium to come into. People are still doing it. That really made our day.
Awesome. Awesome to hear. Mark Percy, going ahead.
All right. Sorry, this isn't best. I don't know. Maybe it is the best part of my week because I like weird old things. Rummaging around at school, I found this laser, which is like, when you were, this is really a question to the more experienced members of the group here. Let's say you were going to high school in the 80s and your physics teacher had the first ever laser that was in your school. I think that's the vintage of this thing. It's a 10 milliwatt helium neon laser, but it's got this wacky connector. Does anybody have any idea if I can power this thing up and what it would take to do so?
Jack Dunn, if you want to unmute and give us your sage knowledge, that would be fantastic.
Right. Jack says went to a power supply. But do you know what type of power supply?
I'm no electrical engineer, but with enough wires, I think you can make anything connect to anything else. Might kill you, but
Well, for my research, I'm not finding much, but it looks like a high voltage DC power supply. So I just didn't know if any, like I said, any of our more experienced members might have remembered using these back in the 90s and being able to give me some kind of clue.
All right. Well, if anybody does come across some more information, let Mark Percy know, so that we can maybe have it lit for the first time in decades in a future e-conference. So that could be really exciting, or very dangerous. I'm not sure, one way or the other. Let's go from Mark Percy to Mark Webb.
Mark, what's the brand on the laser? Is it Spectrophysics or what is it?
Uniphase. Yeah, and it doesn't say anything on the laser tube other than helium neon 10 milliwatt. It's got a manufacture date of 94, but
okay.
I think my biggest clue is this wacky connector, which I've never seen before in my life.
Yeah,
So-
I think they made it unique so that you wouldn't plug anything else into it.
Yeah, it didn't fit in the wall socket, so
okay.
All right.
oh well.
Any other?
So yeah, if anybody thinks of anything.
Any other best parts for the week? All right.
Yeah, we're doing it right now.
Oh, thanks, Ken. Thanks. Yeah, these have really kind of exceeded any of my expectations of what we would be able to do with these, and so it's really a pleasure to see all of your faces, well, some of your faces, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and then in some cases just seeing how backgrounds change or sort of what mood you're in by what virtual background you have behind you. Clearly, Patty is still in the hospitality suite last night, so that's important. Steve Crawford, going ahead.
So I know I spoke a lot today, so I'll be brief, but just a couple of nights ago, I did my first remote planetarium show, my first remote planetarium live talk with a group from Chicago, and it went really well, and I was very nervous about it, so that was definitely the best part of my week.
Fantastic. Right. Anyone else? All right. Well, if that's our best parts of the week, 5 minutes early. Woo. So if you're waiting on the future schedule of e-conferences, that should get put together sometime today or early tomorrow. Primarily, we were waiting to hear back from MAPS as to whether or not we would be doing sort of mini maps next week. But because there's an election issue going on, they will not have a fully seated board by next week. And a board meeting is where we're going to, sort of the business of the organization is going to take place. That's been pushed off a little bit. So we're going to spend a little bit more time kind of putting things together for next week. But we do have a few sort of things out in the future to kind of keep in mind. There's going to be a presentation on the 28th of this month at 7 p.m. With Jonathan Fay. It's going to be a intro to Worldwide Telescope. We're working with Dan Tell at Cal Academy to do an intro to open space. We'll try to do perhaps another intro to Stellarium, and try to like pick all of the different programs that people are using, see if we can't get sort of the heads of the masters of those softwares to give some intros so that all of you have a little bit more awareness of what's out there and what you could be able to utilize. And then of course we'll have our pretty consistent schedule of e-conferences moving forward. So of course, if you're interested in presenting, if you have an idea for a recurring segment, as we've had quite a few on Wednesday and they've gone really, really well, we'd be more than happy to explore those as well. But until then, thanks everybody. It's been fun. Have a great weekend. Keep everybody in mind. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And until next week, you're all unmuted, or at least I should try to unmute all of you. There we go.
There we go.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks,
To everyone.
Thanks,
As
everyone.
Chris McCall said better than anybody else, stay home.
Yes.
Good idea.
Hey. Bye.
Bye.
I want to go moose hunting. Yeah.
See y'all. Bye. Good to see you.
The moose.
You have to ask Mark Webb about the moose, except he missed most of the fun. Just think of Tycho Brahe's pet and go from there.
Okay. Got it.
Hey,
Thanks.
Tycho, how's your nose? Oh, never mind.
Yeah, we had lots of those kind of comments too. Oh my goodness, I laughed.
Yeah, the chat in the presentation was hilarious.
Love it.
Man. So sorry I missed it. Sounds like a lot of fun.
All right.
Sadly, those aren't recorded, so.
And we might do it again sometime. That's the key.
Well, Michael, definitely, your presentation was so good.
I'm just gonna cut little parts of it and
Yeah.
maybe just do the end or just the beginning.
I actually think a lot of my students would really love most of that. So.
They would. I just wouldn't say half of that in front of them,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I still think it's pretty funny that Trixie was upstairs and happened to wander downstairs just when you got to the death by snooze part. I'm like, really? And then she found reasons to hang out in the kitchen.
Oh. Wow. All right, so let's end that stream.